Ho, ho, hey there. I'm Jesse Fox Mayshark, and this is Headlights, Voices from the Progressive South. Headlights is a production of the Progressive South, a nonprofit media platform dedicated to amplifying progressive voices and values across the southern United States. Voices like those protesters at the Hands Off rally here in Knoxville, Tennessee, back in April of 2025. Many of them were featured in the first episode of Headlights, which launched that month. As the year draws to a close, I thought it would be a good time to take a look back at 2025 across the South and to revisit some of the issues and interviews that shaped our work. My hope in embarking on this project was that it could help spotlight people, places, and perspectives that are often marginalized or excluded altogether from most media narratives about our region. The work has taken me from Virginia to Mississippi, Florida to Texas, North Carolina to Alabama. Along the way, I've talked to state legislators, activists, organizers, artists, and nonprofit leaders. And what I've found everywhere are people showing up and doing difficult work in challenging circumstances, no matter how daunting. 2025 hasn't been a good year for progressive values and priorities anywhere in the United States, and if anything, that's doubly true in the South. The Trump administration has embarked on a full-scale campaign to roll back hard-won civil rights protections, immigrant rights, environmental regulations, labor rights, and freedom of speech and the press. In the South, it has done so with the enthusiastic support of most of our governors and state legislatures. It ain't great, in other words. But the onslaught has provoked an array of defenses and pushback, from the courts to street protests to organized community efforts to counteract immigration enforcement and help feed people when federal food aid was interrupted. Although there have been some outspoken elected leaders across the South leading those fights, much of the response has come from grassroots-level organizers, church groups, nonprofit organizations, and independent media telling the stories of people in their communities. So I've found a lot to be heartened by, even though the near future looks very much like the name of one of the year's best films, One Battle After Another. Here are scenes from a few of those battles this year, and if you haven't heard all or any of our prior episodes, you can find links to all of the interviews quoted here in our show notes. The Trump administration's aggressive crackdown on immigrants living in the United States began almost as soon as it took office, and has done nothing but escalate throughout the year. It's been a nationwide project, of course, with masked ICE and Border Patrol agents across the country grabbing people off the street, out of their cars, in line to pick up kids at school, in parking lots at Home Depot, seemingly anywhere and everywhere. But the impact has been heightened in many southern states by the enthusiastic support and assistance of Republican governors and state lawmakers, who had been implementing their own forms of anti-immigrant restrictions for several years already. One of the first big statewide sweeps came in April in Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis has put the entirety of the state government at the disposal of immigration enforcement efforts. He followed that up by announcing the creation of a state-run detention center for undocumented immigrants in the Everglades, the now infamous alligator Alcatraz. In July, I visited Tessa Petit, executive director of the Florida Immigrant Coalition, to hear about the group's multi-pronged efforts to support the state's vast immigrant community in the face of the massive crackdown. Petit's an immigrant herself, as are many of her staff members. I asked her about the psychological and emotional toll of their work.
We are a staff of 26. We have folks from 16 different countries amongst our 26 people. And a lot of us are immigrants, and we're impacted, either family, some of us are in, temporary status. So we've had to do that. We've had to create healing spaces also, what we call healing spaces for our membership, creating spaces where people feel that it is safe enough to be vulnerable, to even cry about what they're experiencing, right? Because we try to be tough, because we know we're doing the work, and we think we have to be strong, but being vulnerable is also a form of strength, right? So we're helping create those spaces.
The South is home to many of the largest immigrant detention facilities in the country. Texas is number 1 in largest imprisoned immigrant population, with Louisiana at number 2, Florida at number 4, and Georgia at number 5. I talked to Katie Blankenship, an attorney who is co-founder of the new organization Sanctuary of the South, which is based in Florida and Louisiana and provides services to people caught in the immigration system. She said the work extends beyond just legal representation.
As far as individual cases go in our evaluation, we have two streams of work that is mostly immigration direct services. That's for detained, non-detained individuals. And that's growing into a lot of safety planning. We're doing a lot of not only getting together with individuals and families, but community groups, right? Like, how does your neighborhood become a community with a safety plan? If there's an ICE raid, who is calling? What's the phone tree? Like, who is disseminating information of legal resources should they need it? Where are we identifying safe places to be to, meet should we need to? All of these things are where we are today and what's happening. And so we're taking, safety planning has always been a part of immigration, but we're taking from, let's get powers of attorneys together and make sure you have all of the vital information you have in your point of contact on the outside to a whole other level of need based on, really this monstrous enforcement and crisis that we're seeing from the Trump admin.
I also went to Louisiana to observe a protest outside a women's immigrant detention center organized by the Service Employees International Union, the second largest union in the country. They called it a justice journey. The center is in Basile, a tiny town in a largely rural stretch of southern Louisiana. Several busloads of SEIU members from around the country gathered there to protest the detention of immigrants, including some who are union members. After the protest, the Union caravan proceeded on to New Orleans, where the members and some of their allies held a rally the next day. Alana Odoms, executive director of the ACLU of Louisiana, noted the irony of the approaching 4th of July holiday, with its promises of freedom and dignity for all.
But I ask you, what does dignity and freedom mean to people incarcerated in cages and in chains? Say nothing! Nothing! What does freedom mean and liberty mean when workers whose labor is stolen sit in prisons and detention centers? Say nothing! Nothing! What does dignity mean when your very existence is criminalized because of your race, your story, or your status? Say nothing! Nothing! Here in Louisiana, we know this shit too well. And forgive me making an expletive, but I want y'all to feel this. We know it too well. We are the highest incarcerated state in the world. The highest incarcerated state in the world. We also are the second highest incarcerator of immigrant people in the world. That ain't right. And the same prison cells that lock up our mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and cousins and brothers are now the same cells that are holding our immigrant brothers and sisters.
The SEIU's involvement was a good illustration of the way that labor and liberation movements have long overlapped in the South. Our historic fights in this region for racial justice have always also been fights for labor rights. At that New Orleans rally, I talked to Aisha Francis, a member of the Union of Southern Service Workers, which is affiliated with the SEIU. It organizes across multiple industries in the South. Francis came on the justice journey from Durham, North Carolina. Along the way, the buses had stopped at significant civil rights sites, including the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and the home of Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi, where the civil rights activist was assassinated by a white supremacist in 1963. Francis connected those fights with the ones she's currently engaged in.
I've seen plenty of movies and things on my history, okay? But to, again, walk in their exact footsteps across that bridge, it is something that I'll never be able to just get over. This is something that I will get to share. I got videos, I got pictures, I got history, my own history, to tell my grandkids, to show my grandkids where you come from, to show my grandkids what the people before me had to go through, what we are going through for them. My hope and my prayer is that with each generation, this fight has gotten a little less brutal, a little easier, but it's the same fight nevertheless. My hope and my prayer is that one day we ain't going to have to fight for none of this stuff that we're fighting for. We're not going to have to fight for dignity and respect on our jobs. We're not going to have to, our immigrant sisters and brothers who are here to seek a better life, to come here, to come to the land of the free, that it be just that. To the thing, we don't want anything extraordinary. We just want an equal playing field. And my hope and my prayer is that I'm alive to see when it becomes an equal playing field, because I know that it will.
Earlier in the year, I stopped by the office of Labor leader Vonda McDaniel. She's president of the AFL-CIO Central Labor Council of Nashville and Middle Tennessee, which represents more than 20,000 working families across a range of industries. She also drew connections between civil rights and labor struggles. She was raised in a Nashville church, First Baptist on Capitol Hill, that was an early center of student organizing during the civil rights movement.
Growing up in Nashville, my parents met at Tuskegee, and really what was the end of the civil rights movement, the traditional civil rights movement as we know it. The pastor of the church was Kelly Miller Smith. Kelly Miller Smith Sr. was a classmate of Martin Luther King at Morehouse, and he was the leader of the local SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So growing up in First Baptist, I was able to really hear firsthand from people like Jim Lawson and Diane Nash, and all of those leaders came through our church at one time or the other, including Coretta Scott King, who was a Women's Day speaker one year. And so I think that I often say that that whole civil rights background is in my DNA. It's a part of the work that my father did when he came to town, when Reverend Smith brought him here. And it has been a part of my own, work life. But even now, when you walk through the halls of the church, the history just kind of jumps out at you, because there are all the reminders of the student training that was done before they would send students to the lunch counters, or before they would get on a Greyhound bus trying to integrate interstate travel.
The South has long been the most labor-unfriendly region of the country. All of our states are so-called right-to-work states, where it's harder for unions to organize and sustain themselves. But even here, McDaniel said, she's seen a wave of new interest in organized labor, especially from younger workers.
So definitely, the enthusiasm around unions are sexy again. There was a long period in my work history where unions were not reflected so well in the media. But over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly on universities with graduate assistants and that kind of thing, that is one of the fastest growing growth areas for the union in terms of our economy. But I think that what people don't realize is that the health of wages for all workers really hinges on the strength of the union movement in the area.
One of the biggest political stories out of the South this year was the redistricting fight in Texas. At President Trump's insistence, Governor Greg Abbott convened a special emergency session of the legislature to redraw the state's congressional maps. That eventually led to the adoption of new maps with 5 new districts drawn to flip them from Democratic to Republican control. But Democrats in the state House didn't make it easy, fleeing the state to deny Republicans a quorum and stall any action. After a few weeks of national headlines, they did return and the maps were passed. But the resistance elevated the issue and led California Governor Gavin Newsom to push for a similar retaliatory move in his state, seeking to add Democratic seats to offset the Republican gains in Texas. California voters approved Newsom's plan in a referendum in November. In Austin, I talked to Texas State Senator Sarah Eckert, who was one of the Democrats who left the state to obstruct the Lone Star redistricting. She said she thought their actions had an impact, even though they couldn't block the maps.
I see this sort of as a pixelated picture where there's a bunch of dots. And once we get all the dots up on the canvas, the picture is going to emerge. And the picture that's emerging is of a centralizing of authority in the executive branch that is astounding and very un-American. So I do think we raised the alarm that this is a president who is willing to have a mid-decade redistricting entirely for his own benefit, not for the benefit of the country, not even for the benefit of his party. It's really for his benefit. That's really shocking. And so I do think that we raised that alarm. I think that we're raising that alarm with the government shutdown. I think we're raising that alarm with the president's willingness to use troops against civilian populations in cities that are controlled by the wrong party, in his opinion, particularly in cities that are controlled by individuals who may run against him in the next presidential cycle.
She also talked about why she thinks districts that are actually representative of a state's population are crucial to a functioning democracy.
When you redistrict a lot, you break up alliances, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And that breaking up of cohesion in communities drives down a sense of trust and faith and participation in the governmental process. So frequent redistricting is bad for democracy generally, no matter what party you're in. Also, redistricting that's heavily gerrymandered, it's when you're in a district that is so diverse that it is difficult to find your voice. It's difficult to even feel a sense of belonging among a majority of a district because, for instance, I'll take Congressional District 10 because I've been looking at it a lot. Congressional District 10 reaches from Lake Travis to Lake Livingston, from Central Texas to East Texas. It includes 3 universities, 2 of them flagship, but very, very different. University of Texas at Austin and A&M, College Station. And it also includes one of our most vibrant urban corridors in the Austin-San Antonio corridor, and then some of our most rural and vibrant agricultural lands. It's going to be interesting. It's an interesting district because it has pieces of the entire state. It has elements of the entire state of Texas in it. But as a congressional district, it is difficult. It is difficult for constituents living in CD10 to recognize each other when they are that different.
While I was in Austin, I also talked with Chris Crom, who is podcast director for the independent nonprofit media outlet Progress Texas. He and his colleagues covered the redistricting battle intensely, as they do all Texas politics, from a progressive perspective. He talked about the challenges of giving voice to minority views in such a large state and the importance of it, too.
You know, I don't feel like we're not super radical. We at the core of our mission is the trying to seek out propaganda, right-wing misinformation. And doing our best to show as many people as we can that they're being lied to and that they're being misled and that they're being manipulated. You know, we're not in the manipulation game. We're not trying to do psyops. We're not, you know, we are not trying to sell anybody anything that we don't think is absolutely true. So there's not much. The only agenda we have is for doing away with falsehood and doing away with all of that stuff. We're looking for, we're looking for kindness and fairness and equity, and diversity. DEI, we're all about DEI. I'll say that right out. We like DEI.
Even without the unusual mid-decade push this year, gerrymandered districts are a challenge for progressive candidates and voters across the South. Districts drawn by Republican legislatures disenfranchise minority viewpoints in most of our states. One group taking a novel approach to the issue is the Can't Win Victory Fund in North Carolina, who we just featured on last week's episode. Its founder, Kate Compton Barr, echoed many of Eckert's concerns about the impact that disproportionate representation has on our politics. As, just residents, voters of the United States, why is this important to us?
In a representative democracy, the goal is to elect leaders that then take their constituents' needs to either the U.S. House or to the state legislature and then advocate for those voters. So theoretically, the person that wins the election in my, let's call it state Senate district, should care about what her voters want, because we could fire her if she doesn't care about us, if she doesn't advocate for us, if she doesn't help make the changes that we say that we need to see. So really, voters are supposed to be in charge. What happens when the maps are drawn this way is that the politicians pick their voters instead of voters picking their politicians. And that means that the politicians don't care what their voters need. Politicians care what their map makers need and what their donors need. And that's kind of it. And so you lose that representative piece of democracy. Yes, technically we are all casting ballots, but we have also all been trained to vote based on R's and D's. And we see people just behaving very consistently that way. And the map makers and the politicians in power take advantage of that, and they do it in both parties. We definitely exist in a system that is propping up, frankly, corrupt and complacent politicians on both sides of the aisle. And the people who have come to power that way aren't very interested in changing those rules. And so the longer they sit there and the more gerrymandering happens, the harder it becomes to kick them out and get our representative democracy.
But even in the challenging electoral landscape of the South, there are people finding ways to make inroads. In Mississippi, I talked to Brandon Jones, political director for the Southern Poverty Law Center Action Fund, which was formed to support candidates in local races for offices like school board and city council across the Deep South. The SPLC is best known for its legal advocacy work in the courts, and in recent years had also moved into lobbying in state legislatures. But Jones said that it became clear that there was a need to engage at the electoral level to help bring more progressive voices to the table.
And so we realized we were going to have to engage politically. Also, it's a known fact for folks who have kind of studied this stuff. Conservatives went local a long time ago. This would be nothing new if we were talking amongst Republicans or conservatives. They were putting money into city council races decades ago. Whenever they have not had success at the federal and state level, they've always gone. Democrats and progressives have been really slow to catch on. We have not been as effective at building out local infrastructure and at putting money into local races. So in some ways, we saw the opportunity to do this work on the progressive side as just a real wide open opportunity that's been there for decades and an opportunity to make up some real lost ground.
And maybe somewhat improbably, this very difficult year ended on something of an up note for Southern progressives. Off-year election results in November and December saw voters in Virginia, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Florida shift to the left. Virginia returned the governor's office to a Democrat, Abigail Spanberger. In Miami, Eileen Higgins defeated a Trump-endorsed Republican candidate by 19 points to become the first Democrat elected mayor in nearly 30 years, and the first woman ever. In Tennessee, a special congressional election in a heavily Republican district made national news when the Republican candidate won it by less than 9 points. down from a 22-point margin for Trump in the same district just a year earlier. After the November elections, I called on my own state legislator, Tennessee State Representative Gloria Johnson, a Democrat, to help assess the political state of play across the South. She was unabashedly optimistic about the opportunities to advance a progressive agenda heading into 2026.
What it shows is people are really tuned in to what's happening. And we know that because we see, the hundreds and thousands of people out in East Tennessee for No Kings protest and things like that. And I can tell you that the one question I get asked multiple times every day through every one of DMs and all my social media, all of my email, when people call my office or they call me, is how do I get involved? And, I want to make sure we can turn this around, and how do I get involved? That is the number one question right now. And people are really stepping up and getting energized because they want to help. And then what Tuesday did, of course, was give people so much hope that we can change this and build a multiracial, multi-generational coalition that is going to care about Tennessee's hardworking families and this country's hardworking families.
And that seems like as good a place as any to leave 2025. Of course, we talked about a lot of other issues here this year. LGBTQ rights in the South, the environmental impact of all these huge new data centers, efforts to fight book bans, gun violence, and much more. You can find all of those episodes on our website, theprogressivesouth.org, or wherever you listen to podcasts. I want to say thank you to all of the great guests we've had and the people who have taken the time to share their stories and perspectives with me. And of course, thank you to all of you for listening. Looking ahead to next year, we'll continue our work here at the Progressive South, both through this podcast and through new features and resources we'll be building out on our website, including a data dashboard and a weekly newsletter. So keep an eye on theprogressivesouth.org for those. Also, an update on our nonprofit status. We have officially been granted 501c3 designation by the IRS. So it's nice to know some parts of the federal government, at least, are still working. That means we will no longer need to receive donations through a fiscal sponsor, and we will soon be adding a new direct donation portal right on the website. I very much appreciate the support we've received this year, and if you're looking to make any year-end donations, you can find information about that on the website. If you do feel moved to make a donation, thank you so much. I wanted to end with a final arts and culture note of the year. The South has myriad Christmas and holiday traditions, of course, with civic celebrations of all kinds. One of my favorites, which I have yet to see in person, but hopefully one of these years, is in Louisiana, the lighting of Christmas Eve bonfires on the levees along the Mississippi River in St. James Parish, about 40 miles upstream from New Orleans. The tradition apparently started in the late 1800s in Cajun communities along the river to help guide Papa Noel, the French name for Santa Claus, safely on his journey through the swamps and bayous. It's grown into a huge community event with many people building elaborate structures 20 or 30 feet high or more and then setting them ablaze. Local fire departments provide supervision to make sure it's all done safely. You can find photos and videos of the bonfires online. It's quite a sight even from the ground, and no doubt provides a pleasing spectacle from above as well, for anyone passing over in a reindeer-pulled sleigh. So whichever holidays you celebrate, and however you celebrate them, I hope you have a great end of the year. We'll be taking next week off, and we will return on January 5th with a preview of some of the most interesting political races we'll be watching across the South in 2026. Thanks, as always, to our friends in Bark for our theme music, and to our producer, Lord Seth the Libertarian at Barbarian Productions. We'll talk to you soon.